Hello. The topic here is static and non-static relationship. Static and non-static relationship. What do you mean by that? Our first question is, can static member function access non-static data? Can static member function access non-static data? Let's see. We have a public class sample, private int num, which is an instance member, and private static int count, which is a static member or class variable. And then there are two functions here, static display and non-static show. Static display and non-static show. So the question here is, as per this, can static member function access non-static data? So we have static member function display. So can it access non-static data, which is num? So can display access num? Now we know very well that display can access CNT. In fact, the use of static member function is to access private static data indirectly. Okay, so display can access CNT, no doubt about that. But can display access num? That's the question. Now here the answer is no. Here the answer is no. Now why answer is no? Think for a while. Why answer is no? Let's say somewhere here in public class demo we have main function. I'm just writing like that, main function. Now, how will you call display of sample? How will you call display of sample in main function? We all know that in order to call static member function, we need not access, or we need not create, rather, we need not create object. So we can directly say sample dot display. In order to invoke static member function, we need not create the object. So we can access it like class name dot display, sample dot display. Now why answer is no here? Why display, which is static, cannot access num, which is an instance member or non-static member? It is because in order to invoke display, we need not create the object. In order to call display, we need not create the object. Since object is not created of sample class, num has not been allocated any memory. So by the time we are inside display, num has not been allocated memory. So that's why no. And now one more question. Can non-static member function access static data? Here the answer is no. Static member function cannot access non-static data. Of course, CNT yes. Now the question is, can this non-static function access static data? So think, how will you call show? First of all, think, how will you call show? If I ask you to call show, how will you call? In order to call show, you all know you must create object of sample class. In order to call show, you must create object of sample class. And by the time you create object of sample class, CNT has been allocated memory already. In fact, static members are allocated memory as soon as class gets loaded. You all know that. Static members are allocated memory as soon as class gets loaded. So by the time you create the object of sample, CNT has been already allocated the memory. So when you are inside show, CNT is there in the memory. No doubt about that. So here answer is yes. So non-static member function can access static data, but static function cannot access non-static data. Sorry, non-static data here. So static display cannot access non-static num, but non-static show can access static CNT. Now, some people might argue here, what if we create sample class object first? Let's say sample S2 is equal to new sample, and then we try to call sample.display. It should be able to access. No, it's not like that. Okay, we can't argue like that because rules are made in Java, in most of the languages, not just Java. Rules are made after considering all the scenarios, all possible scenarios. Here, if you are arguing that you will create the object and call display, you will do that. But the other person may not do that. Other person may call display directly because he knows the concept. In order to call static member function, we need not create the object. So what do you want? Do you want that in your case, display should be able to access num, and in his case, the other person's case, display shouldn't access num? That is not a case. Okay, rules are made after considering all possible scenarios. So we can't argue like that. The thumb rule is static member function cannot access non-static data, but non-static member function can access static data. Okay, having said that, there's one possibility where you can access num here. There's one way where you can make display function access num somehow. How? Let me show you. Inside display, you can create object of sample. Sample ref is equal to new sample. And now you can access num. But how? Ref.num. That's possible. Okay. So static member function cannot directly access the non-static data. But if it wants to access, it has to create the object first and then access. So that's the concept of static and non-static relationship. Thank you.